Amazing. So with that being said, I am super excited to introduce our first speaker of the night. So her name is Ilana Ben-Ari, and she is a CEO, and she's the founder of 21 Toys. But what you don't know about Ilana is that she has 3 passports, and everybody in her family has an accent from somewhere. She paid for toy prototypes by being a karaoke DJ, and she used to live with circus performers for 3 years in Montreal. Ilana, come on up here and share your fuck up.
All right. Cool, so I'm not gonna respond to any of the circus performer questions or karaoke DJ questions, but I'm happy to talk about that later. So yes, I'm really excited to be here. Excellent, so the first thing that I wanna say is this is gonna be very, very, very meta. The reason being that I'm gonna be talking about designing a toy that teaches failure and all the way that I'm gonna say it, I fucked up designing a toy that teaches failure. And I really don't recommend designing a toy that teaches failure. It is the single hardest thing I've ever done. The reason why I did design a toy that teaches failure is because I'm a toy designer turned social entrepreneur. So in 2012, I quit my design job to start my own toy company called 21 Toys. And we use toys to teach what textbooks can't. So skills like empathy, failure, all the skills that the World Economic Forum say are the #1 job skills, but we stopped teaching or valuing after kindergarten. And so the reason that I started that company was because of this much bigger mission around designing an entire suite of toys to teach these skills. This story, however, starts in 2015. So this is a photograph of me on a bench with our design intern at the time, Jenny, and we are working on the failure toy. Now, by 2015, I'm 3 years into starting my own toy company. It is going relatively well. For those of the entrepreneurs in the room, when it appears that you're successful, you're like having a complete meltdown internally every like 5 hours. So give or take, something like that. By 2015, my first toy, which is a toy that I designed in university, which is a toy that teaches empathy, has made it to just about over 35 countries. We're in thousands of schools, but we're also in companies. So major banks are using our toys to teach empathy, which is very exciting. But the failure chip on my shoulder situation is that we're called 21 Toys, but the joke is the 2 is silent. I am a 1 toy company. I am super well known in certain circles as that empathy lady, which not only made it really difficult to date at the time, and that's no longer a problem, but beyond that, it was just like, yes, I love empathy. Empathy is amazing. Why are we only talking about empathy? There's so many other skills that we're working on that I want to design. And failure was the second toy that I was working on, and so while I told the world about it 3 years ago, I had definitely told friends and family about it about 6 years ago. The reason why I hadn't designed it yet was because I was going about designing the failure toy the exact same way that I had with designing the business. So I, at that time, when I first thought about designing a business, it wasn't because I was like, I am an entrepreneur. Not at all. It was because I had this idea and I needed it to be invented or created, and nobody else is interested in starting a company like this, so I just did. What I will say first publicly, I guess, is that the actual way that I started the business was just through a series of escalating dares. So the moment when it started to become a reality was actually that I was on my annual catch-up with an ex of mine who had become quite a successful designer, and he was one of the only design entrepreneurs I'd met. And we were having dinner in New York, and I asked how he was doing, and he was like, I am in love. I've discovered the woman of my dreams, and I've never been happier. And I was like, that's amazing. And he goes, what are you up to? And I was like, I'm quitting my design job and starting a toy company. And he was like, you are? And I internally was like, I am. And so then I did, because I was like, well, I told him. And then I just started floating the idea around with a number of other people, and then it just kind of happened. That plus a ton of hard work, poverty, moving in with other people. Everyone in my family has an accent from everywhere else, so like I have a really strong work ethic to compensate for the lack of any capital. So the empathy toy was kind of my mini success at that time, but the failure toy, I thought, okay, I'm going to design it by just setting a deadline It's going to be 2015. We're going to invite everyone we know. We're going to have a big launch party. It's going to be amazing. And I'm just going to figure it out. Joke is, best way to destroy any sort of creative process is to be bootstrapping your own toy company. So dealing with just the craziness that is running a business, I somehow thought I would design a toy between the hours of midnight and 5 in the morning. And to speak back to this photograph, Jenny and I were supposed to be watching a booth of our empathy toys at this street fair, and instead we snuck away to a side room gallery to start sketching and just trying to work on the failure toy. So I somehow, for some silly reason, thought that this was going to work out. 6 weeks after this photograph was taken, I'm on the phone with one of my closest friends crying, saying, I've got to cancel it. The toy's not ready. There's no way that I feel comfortable launching this. I need to cancel the press releases. I need to uninvite everyone. And I'm just going to eat this whole gallon of ice cream and avoid looking directly into eye contact with anyone from my team for the next week. I didn't just feel like I had disappointed myself, but I had just disappointed everybody. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about going further has really to do with anyone in the creative space. So there are so many things that I discovered through trying to design something in between those hours I actually wasn't setting myself up for success. The number one thing was I just wasn't seeing how I was feeling. I wasn't, for anyone that can read that, it's where's Waldo sitting at a bar saying, nobody ever asks, how's Waldo? Oh, but it's true. No one ever asks, how's Waldo? They ask, where's Waldo? I was Waldo. Everyone was like, where's that toy? And I was like, no one's asking how I'm feeling. This is really hard. So I'm actually going to walk you through kind of the 3 lessons that I learned. Here, sorry. I think you were trying to take a photograph of that Waldo. You got it? Okay. So these are 3 lessons that I learned on why it totally didn't work at all designing the failure toy that way. So the first one was, buckle up, there's a lot of gifts coming up. So if you're inventing anything new, be prepared to feel like a complete failure. I'll try moving over. So if you're trying to invent anything, so I was trying to change education and then the corporate landscape with toys, and I want CFOs to be bringing toys into really big meetings, I should expect that that's probably not going to fully work out entirely, especially on the first run. And for some reason, when I was designing the failure toy, all the misses, all the ways that it wasn't working out, I was starting to feel really, really shitty about myself. The only thing that really got me through that was this graph. So for any of the entrepreneurs or creatives in the room, this is the startup curve. So I started off with initial excitement, then it wore off into novelty, and I was fully in the trough of sorrow. And so the trough of sorrow is where most of my colleagues currently are. They say that it takes about 5 to 7 years to have a business that's kind of running, somewhat. You're kind of maybe paying yourself after 5 years, give or take. So most of us live in the trough of sorrow for a full-on number of years. The first product release, the crash of ineptitude, the wiggles of false hope. You're like, we were on TV, and you're like, we're gonna make $1 million, and you're like, no, just got a lot of messages from my parents' friends, which is nice, but I can't take that to the bank. So I mostly was just in the trough of sorrow, but the idea that I both felt like shit, but I knew I was supposed to feel like shit, somehow made it so that I just kept pushing through. Number 2. Feeling like your failure really sucks, so you should totally hide out until you're ready to be judged again. One of the biggest mistakes I made as a creative was that I didn't actually protect my creative process by saying that this is really hard and this is gonna really suck and maybe I don't want an audience right now. So this idea or this thought that I'm going to be designing a new toy and I'm gonna invite people into the process when it's still so new and so raw was a really bad idea because my ego, as well as just my own feelings, weren't ready to hear feedback. This is the alternative GIF that I chose. So what I ended up actually doing was I hid out, and I completely protected myself from any sort of judgment. Not only that, I was actually really nice to myself. So if I was designing and I felt like having a really nice meal, I was like, I'm gonna have a nice meal. If I wanna take a nap, I'm taking a nap. Because this is really hard, and I need to be a lot nicer to myself to do that. Going back from 2015, it actually took me 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. It took me about 3 years, actually, now that I'm doing the math, because I don't know what year it is. It's 2019. So 2018 was when I actually picked the failure toy back up. The reason is because I got a call from one of our biggest clients. one of like the largest banks in Canada, and they said, we really want a failure workshop. And I said, stop calling me. This is the second time you've asked for it, and they had asked us for it about a year ago. I didn't actually say that. I said, sure, no problem. When do you need it? And this was January, and they said, well, we don't need the workshop till June. And I said, perfect. Yes, we can definitely do a failure toy workshop. It's not totally done, but if you're willing to take that risk, we'll go ahead and do it. And they said, sure, we're really happy to take on that risk. So I said, great. I told my team that I was not going in every Thursday and Friday. I was going to be having luxurious lunches and naps, and they're just going to have to support me in that. And so I started in that process, and what ended up happening is that then this client contacted me 2 months later and said, actually, we'd really love to see a demo of this toy. Could you do it in about a few weeks? And I said, yeah, sure. No problem. And then I really started to hide out. So the idea of just having conversations with myself was actually super, super valuable. It didn't mean that I didn't take other people's input in, but it meant that I protected myself when it was too new and too raw from getting too much input in. So flash forward to 8 a.m. The meeting is at 9 a.m. I have our director of facilitation and training. He meets me at a cafe on the basement floor of the building we're about to pitch. And I said, okay, here's the toy. And I walked him through how it worked. And then I said, now pretend like I didn't just show it to you, and we're going to go pitch it upstairs. And so what ended up happening is that I showed the toy. Luckily, we had enough of the concept that it was a game of balance, and there was risk involved, and we got them to play with the prototype just long enough before they ran out of time and had to go to the next meeting, which was the perfect amount of time because there were no follow-up questions, and they kind of just got the gist of it, and they said yes. So I now had between May and June to finish it, to make a full 2 to 3 hour workshop all about failure with the toy. Now, the amazing thing about hiding out and not wanting to be judged at all is that the final step in the creative process, if anyone understands this GIF, this is one of the greatest skits I've ever seen. It's on Netflix. I think you should leave. I don't think anyone in this room, has anyone seen this? Okay, yeah, thank you. Rayanne, yes, nailed it. Okay. But the final step in the process was I went from not wanting to hear from anybody's feedback to knowing that the toy wasn't finished until I got everybody's feedback. So I went from protecting it to then saying, I want everyone in the world to tell me all the reasons that this sucks so that I can design, I can incorporate it, I can change it. And so I put it into the hands of my team, facilitators, I put it into anyone that would listen to me, and that's how we got it over the finish line. So by June 21st of last year, we were able to, in fact, create what was a pretty amazing 2 hours in a cottage with some really high up people at some major organization, having really robust, interesting conversations about failure. And I never would have gotten there if I hadn't really protected my creative process and understood how failure was part of those learnings. So this is the failure toy. So funnily enough, somehow I got booked for this tonight. We launched the failure toy on Kickstarter exactly a week ago, which is woo! So thank you. Nobody look too closely at me. My eyes are very bloodshot. I'm on like 5 coffees. And it's actually Ironic headlines. It's going very well. So we, so far, we've got about 200 new backers. We're in about 19 countries. The reason that the failure toy has resonated, I think, is because part of it is I've brought people along the way. There are people who've been waiting 3-4 years for this. And I have learned so much through the process of designing this toy that I have now tried to better incorporate that into my own design process. The way that it works is it's a game of balance. And so you have players who are building a challenge with, they get 5 minutes to build abstract shapes that balance on these unstable bases. At the end of 5 minutes, you actually remove those pieces. And if any pieces balance, you get a point for those. You also can lose points anytime pieces fall. And you're playing at the exact same time as multiple teams are playing. So each game escalates, we add different layers and components, but it's really about bringing insights into how you deal with risk, blame, competition, how you navigate different incentives. So some people are a lot more ambitious, some people aren't. But all of it has to do with the different behaviors that you personally will have that are personal to you when you're given certain challenges and risks. And then beyond that, beyond self-awareness, understanding how the other people that you work with also deal with those. So lastly, why teach failure? I don't think I need to necessarily convince this room why you need to teach failure. But my heart and my passion is in education. That's why I started my company. The idea that we don't teach failure education is crazy to me. Failure is something that we all as human beings will go through our entire lives. Yet right now, as far as I'm concerned, we practice failure abstinence instead of failure education in school. So we just say, okay, everyone's gonna deal with this. We're not talking about it. We're gonna close our eyes and let everyone just kind of figure it out on their own. I don't know if there's a fear that if we start teaching failure, people are gonna start having all these unsafe failures all over the place, and it's gonna be a disaster. But the idea that we don't teach failure, and then on the other end, we have companies that are saying fail fast, fail often, but they're not acknowledging all the complex emotions that come with failure. Really the idea of teaching failure education is because we need to be having conversations in between those two worlds. The worlds where we celebrate success and A+, and we don't talk about failure, and the worlds where we say fail fast and fail often. But we don't actually give the tools to navigate that. So with that, thank you so much.
Amazing. Ilana, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that first slide kind of said it all. It was a little bit of a meta story, a story about a failure toy being shared at Fuckup Nights. But I think there's so many valuable lessons there for if you're creative or if you're just working on something new and trying to bring something to life. I think there's really that balance. You know, in the tech world, we hear this whole concept of just ship it and like see what happens. I think when you're doing something really new and something really innovative, you do have to wait until it's fully ready. So congratulations on doing the right thing and really launching it correctly. So congratulations on your success. And let's do some Q&A. So before we get to that, just a quick note. If you're asking a question, just please keep the question itself brief so that we can get through as many as possible. And we will have a couple of mic runners, so just raise up your hand if you have a question.
Hi. So you mentioned a part where you were like bootstrapping and you were like working on the toy and like you took your time to launch it. So what were you thinking in that time? Like how did you convince yourself that this is all going to be worth it, that you have to bootstrap now and it's all going to pay off one day? Like how did you like keep the optimism going pretty much?
How to keep the optimism going? That's a great question. I think I had those like naive, I can conquer the world. I think that got me going for at least 6 months. What really kept me motivated was actually being surrounded by a community of entrepreneurs. So I work out of the Center for Social Innovation. So I moved to Toronto to start my business. I was living in a few other places before that. And the community that I had around me, we were seeing how hard it was, but we were also seeing that those small wins were really leading to much bigger wins. But it's a daily practice. I think most entrepreneurs, you're just living in two worlds where you're like, I'm the greatest thing that's ever, no one has seen this, I'm changing the world. And then you're like, I'm garbage. No one will ever understand this. So I think, especially when I look back on like the creative process, the one thing I would say is, as designers, I think we're trained to kind of hold two truths at the same time. One is about being really humble and being really empathic, so listening to others, exploring, observing, having no judgment, and at the exact same time having kind of a level of like arrogance and like no one will ever understand me until I make this. And you kind of have to live in both those worlds at the same time. And it's that friction that I think allowed me to just get through the discomfort and get to those smaller and eventually bigger wins.
Okay, to go ahead. Awesome. Hi, Ilana. My name is Kevin Rempel. You're a futurepreneur entrepreneur as well, aren't you?
Yes.
Awesome. Mitch, we'll talk after, but that's what I learned about you, so I'm excited to have heard you share your story today. Thank you for that. My question for you is, talking about the journey about the 3 to 5 year window, 6 years, like really grow a business. I'm entering year 4 of my business as well. What did you find there was a tipping point? And if so, do you know why that happened, or what really helped you get over the hump of that 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I've done a lot of like reflecting on it. Something happened when we turned 5. I think one of it is just actually existing. There's a lot of people that go, yeah, this sounds really cool. I'll talk to you next year. And you're like, I might not exist next year. And so I think just literally existing for a certain amount of years, genuinely, the conversation that you started in year 1 may not even start to develop in year 2 or year 3. I don't know what the math is, but for some reason they say 5 to 7 years. One of the biggest surprises I had when I started a business was it took me 2 years before I started just acknowledging and recognizing that like very few entrepreneurs just pay themselves, which is crazy. And so I like to joke like I'm just a train station for money. Like when we first started, I would just like money would show and I'd like wave at it and it would go over here. And like every now and then like the money would get bigger, but it would just be a bigger train that was going by that I was just like waving at because every win we had would pay for team or would pay for toys. And so it just kind of, I just kept watching money going like this. And I think the tipping point for me was when I started to just the things I was investing in started to really pay off. So that first mini order that we got, a school board saw my TEDx talk on Twitter. That's how we got our first order. And I used that pre-order. I asked them, okay, great, can you pay me upfront in full? And I'll have it for you in 6 months. For some silly reason, they said yes. So that meant that I could, instead of making 30 toys, I could make 100 toys. And then the next big milestone was we did a Kickstarter campaign in 2014 for the empathy toy. And we won a Futurepreneur Award loan, which allowed me to bring on some contractors. So there's a lot of things that feel scary or like you win an award loan. So I remember just the weirdness of like, I won $50,000 debt. I was like, wait, what did I just win? So there are things that are wins that can feel like losses, but I think the more that you learn and you find out just with your product market fit, but then also just like who's the right team, who are the right contractors, what can I like start to rinse and repeat, what do I just have to stop reinventing the wheel? It takes years and years. And it's also, I think my story, because I've been bootstrapping, I have no investors. It's felt especially long, even though when I compare myself to my peers, it still feels to be that 5 to 7 year window. So all I can say is it's really hard, keep going, it's gonna eventually get easier. But I do think at that 5 year mark, just things just started to kind of fit into place a lot more.
Hi, Ilana. Right here. This is Lily. First, I want to thank you for sharing such a difficult topic, if I may say, about failure toys, about empathy toys that you don't want to hear anymore about. But also, my question to you is, how did you start to kind of realize that, okay, how did you put your business out there? Putting that idea out there. I am in my first year in starting a business, so it's like it's been very fresh for me, and I'm finding it difficult to just kind of like get it going. If I may say, also, if you have time, what's your next toy?
First of all, congratulations. That's amazing that you've just started. I started with, I called it like word prototyping. So I literally told every single person I met. They were like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I was like, hi, I'm Ilana. I'm going to change education with toys. Which meant, A, I lost a lot of friends, so I got a lot more free time. But also, the more people that I spoke to and told about it, the more that people showed up. Toronto especially, I've never been in a city where if you tell people what you're working on and you're approaching it with hard work and with passion, people will show up. Like it's kind of crazy and it's not gonna happen overnight. But I'd be a bit, at least for me, I'd be a bit shameless about telling people. The other thing that I could take advantage of was it's a physical toy. So the way that I got the empathy toy off the ground was I would just walk around with a prototype. I also broke into every education conference I could, and I would put a toy on the table, I'd walk away, and then like teachers would swarm the toy, and they'd be like, whose is this? And I'd like show up and be like, oh, I forgot my toy there. And that's literally how I got introduced to the first school board. Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't all sneak in, I volunteered at some, and yeah. But like being kind of a bit shameless, putting it out there, if it's not a physical product, even just like having something in print, it forces you to really start to craft what is it that I'm building, because people will tell it back to you. People say, oh, you're doing this. You're like, that's not at all what I'm doing. Why do you think that? So I'd say connecting with as many entrepreneurs, communities, and just kind of be shameless about find the right stages and the right places to just start telling people. And you're gonna slowly start to get that community, and you're also gonna get those first customers, which are probably going to be people who tell you this is amazing or I'd like it if. So those people you want to keep really close.
Hi.
So we're going to do one more question. Yep.
Over here. Thanks for sharing your story. I just had a question. We caught a glimpse of your final prototype of your toy. Did your first prototype look similar to your final one? And if you had X many number of iterations on your prototype, at which point did you think, this is the one I'm going to go with?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know how to answer without sounding a little insane, but I don't know how to translate, like as an industrial designer, you look at physical products, and like a shape represents like a feeling or like a reaction to something. So I knew with our empathy toy, it's an abstract wooden puzzle you play blindfolded. So everything's made out of like maple and walnut woods, and there's a lot of textures to it. So that was really important to the first toy. With the failure toy, I knew I still wanted to use like woods, and like I was playing with cork maybe. But I knew that if I wanted to teach failure, how do I design a toy that gets immediate stress and immediate buy-in? So I knew from day one that it had to have to do with balance. So that feeling you get when you're playing like Jenga, or like that, like, no, it can't fall. I'm like, okay, cool, I got buy-in. But then how do I create a history? And so the idea of making it open-ended, the idea that I could give people a selection of pieces, they could use one piece, they could use a number of pieces to build something that needed to balance, and how their reactions to being scared that it may or may not work, and then designing like consequences around it. I knew that that was going to be where it went, but it went through so many iterations. It used to look like Kinder eggs. We had a whole year of egg design, so I have like baskets of eggs made out of 3D printed egg, like Kinder Surprise things. And then we were working with like seesaws, and we had one version where I took a Kurt Vonnegut quote that said like, standing closest to the edge is where you get like the best views. And I worked with another designer where we made like a big circle, and it was like, this is your comfort zone, and so you want to move closer to your comfort zone or further away from your comfort zone. But every time I talked to him, I was like, we need those eggs. I really want those eggs in this. And it actually honestly wasn't until I was sitting with Jenny in that art gallery where I was like, let's shave off those eggs. And then it turned into this like beautiful diamond. And I was like, diamonds! So I had no real reason for why I knew that that was the right direction, other than it just felt right. So there's like the logical side of it, but then there was also just like, I don't know what emotional attachment I have to these eggs that then turn into diamonds. But I was like, I feel like it's an interesting enough shape that I could play with balance and different faces and surfaces. But the last thing I'll say is a big part of the creative process isn't just sketching. A lot of it literally is dreaming and napping and staring. And so you can look like you're like, I am working, and you're just like napping. But it's really true. That is like a really big part of it. And it's really just about getting in touch with yourself and being like, what direction should I be going in? As opposed to just working in a wood shop.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to end it.